Salutations fam, this is Arim from Haltessiagaming, and in today's video I've got a deck profile that people have been anticipating for a couple of weeks now. I was cooking in the lab and I came up with something, but what actually I want to talk about before I get into that is, to explain the kind of why there's been a bit of an absence. But I have been out of town for the last couple of weeks. I've been, traveling across the country. So I've actually been gone most of the week. I have not been home. Last night was the first time I've slept in my bed in like more than a week at this point. Um, so yeah, I've been away. If you wanted to be able to not have to wait for me to like get back to be actually be able to like post my deck list and things like that, my Patreon link is in the description. It's going to be in all my pinned comments moving forward. All of my deck lists get posted on my Patreon. Get like so like there the Patreon gives you access to like a private Discord server where you'll get access to everything. The All of my deck lists get posted there immediately. You get to see like the deck building theory and all of the other things. But in regards to the standards I have for my YouTube channel, I don't post a video to my YouTube channel until I have gone to a tournament with the deck and I have performed with the deck. So if I haven't, actually done well with the deck at a tournament, I'm not going to post a video about it on my YouTube. But my Patreon's a bit different in that I will actually talk about like the theory. You'll get to see the ideas, and you'll get to see like the live updates of me being at the tournament where I'm talking about myself, playing the different rounds and what I'm playing against and all that other stuff. So if you want to have the early release stuff, you can subscribe to the Patreon. There's also the content that I won't be uploading to YouTube, like my sealed only challenge, a lot of my old series that like just didn't meet the quality of what I wanted to upload to my YouTube channel. So that's out of the way. Without further ado, I want to talk about this deck right here. I've been playing Branded Blue Eyes. I've taken it to a couple of events. I took it to the first tournament I took it to. I got top four. I ended up losing in the last round because of some deck building decisions that I altered. Then I took it to another tournament and I went undefeated. And this is one of the reasons why I've been so tired. Is the end of my trip. I actually went to a regional. It was a pretty large regional. It was, I think, like the guy said that it was the largest regional they ever had in that region. So that was pretty cool. And I'll talk a bit more about that later, but I want to go ahead and get into the deck profile. So we got our Branded Blue Eyes deck profile, and I'll explain some deck building decisions as we get through. But without further ado, let's go ahead and hop right into it. So to start things off, you're only playing three of the boss monster, three Blue Eyes monsters. So you play the one copy of the vanilla and then two copies of Blue Eyes Jet Dragon. This card is honestly at this point in the game, I really do feel like Jet Dragon is the best Blue Eyes monster right now. It's better than Tyrant. It's better than Alternative. Like it's the best Blue Eyes monster. This is absolutely the reason why I win most of my matches with the deck. It's so strong. And it's deceptively strong in that like when it comes to like the strength of like boss monsters, oftentimes it's not the boss monsters that have like this ridiculously crazy powerful effect. It's the cards that have like a good effect, but they're really easy to summon. So like you'll look at a lot of the boss monsters throughout the years that have been like talked as broken. The main thing about them is always how strong they are compared to how easy they are to summon. And Jet Dragon is a phenomenal card for how easy it is to summon. But moving on, we've got two copies of the White Stone of Ancients. I'm only playing two. I opted not to play the Stone of Legend because I didn't really feel like I needed it. But yeah, this is the lineup. I play the second Stone of Ancients. You could probably get away with one Jet Dragon. You can probably get away with one Stone of Ancients. I wanted to play 2 and 2 because I wanted to have a bit more of a grind game, a bit more of an ability to like access it, because you do want to draw it sometimes, because if you draw it, you just discard it and then get it into rotation that way. And then moving on into engine stuff, we got two copies of Fallen of Albaz. One of the things that I with the deck building things, in the first tournament I took the deck to, I was only playing one Fallen Valbaz, and that did end up losing me the game in the final round. So I bumped it up to two. Yeah, you're gonna draw it a bit more, but like having the second one in the deck, like it does come up. So yeah, but then moving on, we have the one copy of Spriggan's Kit. This is a engine piece, necessary engine piece to use certain stuff in the deck. And, you know, at the end of the day, it is an additional normal summon that you don't actually have to normal summon. You can special summon this if you have an Albaz fusion in rotation. And it does, you know, it searches branded fusion. You can add it off of your other stuff, and, you know, it's an additional starter. Three copies of your primary normal summon, Keeper of Dragon Magic. I have returned to Keeper of Dragon Magic as the primary normal summon. I was originally playing this as the primary normal summon in Branded Blue Eyes. I switched to a Luber when I got a Luber because it got like reprinted, made it cheaper. But with the new things that have been added to the game, Keeper of Dragon Magic has returned as like the most powerful normal summon. This card is just absolutely phenomenal, similar to like in the old list. You know, being able to, if you already have Branded Fusion, search Instant Fusion, search Fusion Deployment. You know, this card's just really, really good. With the new Instant Fusion combo, this has just, it's the best starter in the deck. And I can't overstate how impactful the second effect was, coming up a lot. Being able to just bring back Blue Eyes was very, very impactful. Being able to bring back Fallen of Albaz was, you know, very, very impactful, because in a scenario where your stuff gets, you know, taken out of rotation, being able to put it back in rotation with this card's second effect was impactful. Anyway, moving on to the next part of the deck, we have, you know, the Dogmatica cards. I'm playing one Ecclesia, one Maximus, and one Floor. One of the things is that Maximus is a point of contention for the deck. A lot of people don't necessarily agree with playing Maximus. But as I mentioned in one of my previous Branded Blue Eyes deck profiles, you don't have to activate Maximus. You can just summon it as a 3K body. If you're worried about playing, you're playing against Branded Despia, you're worried about triggering their stuff and letting them plus, realize that you don't have to activate the effect. You can just summon it, but having it in your deck raises the ceiling of your deck so much. And yeah, I absolutely do not regret playing it. And I'll talk about it a bit more when we get to the extra deck, but, you know, that's it for that right now. And then you play the one copy of Tri-Brigade Mercurier. It didn't come up super often, but it's just nice to have, because it allows you to have that one extra negate that raises the ceiling deck. And, you know, when you banish it, it does have that search. And then the last two monsters that are being played in the deck is you have the one copy of Darlingtonia Cobra and the one copy of, you know, the Frog. Yeah, that's it for the monsters. I'll explain a bit more when we get to the later stages of the deck. But yeah, that's it for the monsters. Let me go ahead and slide these out. Onto the spells. Obviously, you're playing triple copies of Branded Fusion. There's not much to say about this. Triple copies of the Dear Servant. Not much to say about this. This is one I do want to talk about a bit, and it is Branded in High Spirits. This is one of the reasons to play Branded Blue Eyes, because this card is so much better in Branded Blue Eyes than it is to Branded Despia. Honestly, that's one of the big reasons why I wanted to explore Branded Blue Eyes again. Was at one of the tournaments, someone had asked me why I've played Branded Blue Eyes in the past over playing, you know, like Branded Despia. What's the thing that makes me decide to play Branded Blue Eyes instead of Branded Despia? And I want to talk about that in this video, kind of talk about the differences between Branded Blue Eyes and Branded Despia, because it is an extremely common misconception that Branded Blue Eyes is just a worse version of Branded Despia. But that's a deck building problem and not really a like deck as a concept problem. But Branded High Spirits is basically, it's another starter that you can play to get access to Branded Fusion. But it is also more copies of Nadir, because you don't actually have to use the second effect to discard and search. You can actually just reveal and then send an Albaz Fusion. And because, you know, Keeper is a dragon, the Blue Eyes monsters are dragons, this card is so much more viable in Branded Blue Eyes comparatively, Whereas in Branded Despia, the Despia monsters are all fairies, so you can't really get value off of it to be able to search kit to have access to Branded Fusion. And it's like you can play Construct to be able to like enable that, but then you're like giving up a slot in your extra deck to make this live. And so that's why Branded Despia doesn't really play this. But moving on, you play one copy of Instant Fusion for the Predaplant combo, one copy of Ultimate Fusion, and then one copy of Fusion Deployment. Well, I mean, I guess I'll do it like this, right? And the Predaplant stuff, being able to search all of this, basically, Keeper of Dragon Magic just gives you so much more access to your deck compared to Aluber, because, you know, being able to search Ultimate Fusion, being able to search Fusion Deployment, and then also in the grind game, being able to search these cards is very, very relevant as well. And then the last card that is part of your engine that you're playing the one copy of Branded Retribution. This card is, again, much more viable in this deck compared to Branded Despia, because you're much more likely to have multiple Albaz fusions engraved because of things like Nadir, because of Branded and High Spirits. And in regards to follow-up, being able to use Branded Retribution on the following turn to add back Branded Fusion is, you know, very, very viable. So yeah, that's it for the engine lineup in regards to the deck. Obviously, like, this is not 40 cards, but the last cards in your deck are just like, you know, different, you know, staples and utility cards. So this is one I want to talk about, and it's one of the things that I've changed for the deck to kind of lean towards, and it is 3 copies of Salesman. So one thing about this deck is that, like, your biggest weakness has always been Ash Blossom specifically. So you want to have something that will be able to, like, stop you from getting ashed on your Branded Fusion. And this card performs the role exceptionally well, while also being really, really good going second as well. It's very, very versatile, because, like, let's say you have a hand that doesn't lose to Ash. You can Salesman call something else. Going second, you can go Salesman call whatever negate they just set up to force out the negate. Like, this card is very, very, very good. And it synergizes with one thing, that a deck building thing that I felt, because I don't really feel that Ash Blossom is very strong this format. The only deck is really strong against is Branded Despia. And, well, any Branded player is going to be building their deck to be prepared to, like, stop Ash Blossom from, like, ending their turn. So the problem with Crossout is that you have to play Ash Blossom, and if you draw the Ash Blossom, then the Crossout doesn't actually do its job. And I wanted to play something that always did the job of what I'm playing the card for. The problem with Crossout is that sometimes it doesn't do the job that I'm playing it for. So Salesman, you can always go Salesman, call Ash Blossom, and then it stops them from ashing you. And then, you know, we're playing the one Call by the Grave, you know, being able to chain it. It's not dependent on having the card still in your deck. You can just chain it, whatever. And then 2 copies of Super Polymerization. This card is exceptional. This card is searchable in this variant. I can't tell you how many times I searched this to, like, break a board or something, and it was just, it's very, very strong. I mean, there's not really much necessity to talk about Super Polymerization. And then the last couple of utility cards I'm playing 2 copies of Infinite Impermanence. And then the other reason to play Branded Blue Eyes, 3 copies of Skill Drain. Being able to just play under Skill Drain is one of the things that makes this deck as good as it is. So yeah, that's the 40 card main deck. One of the things I was trying to do, I wanted to try and get my hands on a Cartesia. I wasn't able to. I'll talk about that more when we get into the extra deck. But yeah, that's the 40 card main deck. I absolutely loved the lineup. There wasn't really anything that I felt, you know, was an incorrect decision. Yeah, I'll talk a bit more about it later, but for now we're going to move on to the extra deck. And now we move on to the extra deck. So when we get to the 15 card, I'm going to talk about it a bit more, but the first 14 cards are, you know, pretty set in stone. I was very, very happy with this lineup. I didn't regret it at all. To start things off, we have the 1 copy of Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon. This card is still very, very strong. Being able to hit over everything every turn, recycle trap cards is, you know, very strong. Being able to reset Expulsion and do that every turn. Being able to reset Imperm every turn. Being able to, you know, just keep using your cards and attack over everything. It's 3,400. Very good card. And you don't have to summon this with Ultimate Fusion. You can summon this, with just, your normal branded fusion lines as well. One copy of Mirror Jade, one copy of Lubellion, one copy of Titaniclad, one copy of Brigran to search the bird, one copy, not one copy, two copies of Albion, one copy of Alba, one copy of Chimera Felicia. This is, something that you can play as an additional, like Nadir Sen. It searches, Ultimate Fusion, searches Fusion Deployment, searches Super Polymerization, searches Brand Fusion, it searches all of that stuff. But also, I did Super Poly into this one time over the course of the event, which was really funny because they had a Drago Stapelia on their board. And then, like, the Banish, it actually came up because, being able to banish their monsters, I used my Drago Stapelia to make one of their monsters a level 1 and then use this to banish it so that the Albion wasn't able to get anything in the end phase. Speaking of Drago Stapelia, the one copy of Drago Stapelia, the one copy of Amulo, and one copy of Garura, and one copy of Entus, and then one copy of Psyframe Lord Omega. Now, the last card in my extra deck that I played, because I mentioned I played in 3 tournaments, so I want to talk about that a bit more. So, at the first 2 events that I was playing a Guardian Chimera in my extra deck as a 15th slot. But before the regional, I noticed that I hadn't summoned Guardian Chimera a single time, and I figured I should probably cut it in favor of something else. So it came down to me deciding on what I wanted to play. And there were a couple of cards that I was considering. There was the Guardian Chimera because obviously, even though I hadn't summoned it, you can still summon it and it might come up. It was a copy of Rinbroom because this makes your Kashtira matchup a little bit better. There was the Sprind to potentially play through Contact C. There was Dust Dragon. This, even without Cartesia, this is still a card that you can send to your graveyard to be able to, like, special summon a Dogmatica monster from the deck. You can reveal your spellcasters off of Branded High Spirits to search the kit to get access to Branded Fusion with, this in the deck. And for the regional, I actually did end up choosing to play the copy of Dust Dragon because of the reasons I mentioned, and I figured if I could get lucky, I might be able to get my hands on a copy of Cartesia, and then that would make this even better and would raise the ceiling of the deck. With hindsight, this was not the correct play. I was not supposed to be playing the Dust Dragon, and what I should have been playing was the second copy of Garura. This card several times came up. The second Garura came up several times over the course of all of the events. In the regional, actually, one of my losses was because I wasn't playing this. I didn't actually use Dust Dragon a single time because every time it ended up in my graveyard, I already had access to all my Dogmatica monsters. I was never having trouble getting access to Branded Fusion, so the synergy with Branded High Spirits never came up. But in 2 separate occasions, not having the second Garura as a super poly target, it came up, and one of my losses, it actually lost me the match. So, in the future, moving forward, I will be playing the second Garura in my extra deck as the 15th slot until I can get a Cartesia. If you have a Cartesia, there's Dust Dragon. If you're worried about Contact C, you have Sprind. If you're worried about Kashtira, you have Rinbroom. And, if you want to lean more heavily into this, you can play Guardian Chimera. But for me personally, I will be playing the Garura as my 15th card slot. So now, with all of that, mentioned, we're going to go ahead and talk about the side deck. This is another thing where I'm going to talk a bit more because there were some decisions that I made for the regional that was different from what I was playing in the other 2 tournaments that I regret with hindsight. If I would have played the same side, if I would have played a card that I had been playing, I would have done better. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and talk about that. So let me go ahead and grab that stuff. So now on to the side deck. As you all know, if you've been following my channel for any period of time, you know that the first card in my side deck is almost always going to be Dino Wrestler Pankratops. Simply one of the best going second cards just ever created. It's just good in every matchup. It's so good. Two copies of Nibiru. This is one of the things I decided on for the regional. In hindsight, it was not the correct play. Every single time I had Nib in my hand, it didn't do anything. And I actually took out a card in order to play this, and I regret it immensely. If I would have been playing the other card, like in every scenario where I had Nib, if it was the other card, it would have won me the match. Nibiru just, it wasn't impactful. Yeah, it just wasn't impactful because, you know, they either always had the negate or they always played around it. Whereas this other card, they wouldn't have been able to do so, and the other card would have won me the game. And I'll talk about that a bit later. I'm citing two copies of Ash Blossom for, you know, going second. And just in general, like, it's a good card to go second against a lot of decks. You know, certain scenarios you do need to have hand traps to stop the play and supposed to be able to, like, break the board afterwards. So citing two Ash, and then alongside it, I am citing two copies of Ghost Spell. I don't regret citing Ash and Ghost Spell. And then I'm playing my expulsion targets. I'm playing one copy of Jinzo. This card is so strong if you pair it with the expulsion lock against Labyrinth, being able to just, you know, summon Jinzo to your board. I played against Labyrinth in one of my events. I expulsioned. I summoned a Stone of Ancients to their board, and I summoned Jinzo to mine, and I was able to just snowball them out of the game from there. And then the other expulsion target I'm playing is the copy of Raw's Disciple. You can play the Gimmick Puppet. It's better in some circumstances. It's also significantly more expensive for some reason, and I don't feel like buying it. But the differences between the two is that, like, with the Gimmick Puppet, if it hits their board, they're locked, and there's nothing they can do about it. Whereas with the Raw's Disciple, they can out it and be able to play afterwards. But the difference, so like if you hear that, you might just assume that the Gimmick Puppet is just always better, but that's not necessarily true, because the Gimmick Puppet only locks them for that one turn that it's summoned to their field, whereas Raw's Disciple locks them indefinitely until it's, like, as long as it's on their board, they can't special summon. So, you know, they have their strengths and weaknesses, and honestly, I like the Raw's Disciple a lot better in a lot of scenarios because of that ability for it to lock them for multiple turns. And if you aren't able to, like, kill them immediately on the crackback, you can just kind of sit behind the Raw's Disciple with your stuff in defense, and they can't really do anything about it. They can't tribute summon over this. Like, it's very, very powerful. But yeah, moving on, we have three copies of Dark Hole. I cited this because I wanted something that was good to go second against a lot of decks, but also had the additional utility of, if I'm expecting my opponent to be on, like, the Ibly lock, I wanted something that would clear the Ibly lock. So Dark Hole will destroy the Ibly off my field, so I'll be able to play, while also being the ability to, like, break an opponent's board going second. And then the last couple of cards, I was playing two copies of Twin Twisters. I didn't really feel like I was struggling that much against back row. Like, I'm not really worried about the Trap Tricks matchup. I'm not really worried about the Labyrinth matchup. But the one thing as Runic is, it can be difficult. I did win my matches against Runic, but I still wanted to have something to side in against that deck. And, like, Twin for the field spell is, you know, pretty good. And then the last card in the side deck is, you know, the Branded Expulsion. This is what I played for the regional. In hindsight, I would not play the Nibirus, and I would, you know, play Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. So this was a card that I played at my first two events. I didn't play it at the regional. Every match at the regional that I didn't win, I lost because of time and, like, not having any chance to interact with them, not having any chance to play the game. I had one loss in time against a Sprite player. He comboed into time and then summoned the Red Resonator and gained life. I had Nib in my hand. If the Nib was Dogwood, I would have won that match. That was one of my losses. And then, and this is the unfortunate part of the story, that I didn't actually top the regional. I ended up bubbling because in, I believe, round 8, I got my second draw So I had 2 draws, 2 losses, and 5 wins over the course of 9 rounds. And the second draw that I had was playing against I was playing against a deck where they um they um they comboed, and I had the nib, but they were able to get the Baron negate. But it's like ultimately like they didn't win in time, but because I never got to play, we ended up getting a draw. Whereas if the nib was dogwood, I would have won that match. And then my other draw, because I had another draw where same scenario, we ended up getting a draw where if that nib was dogwood, I would have won the match. So like literally all of them. Well, I won't say all of them, because there was one match where I just straight up lost. So it's like it was a match against Branded Despia. I played it very, very poorly in hindsight. I don't know why, because it's like I had double super poly, skill drain, and like access to the Jet Dragon loop. But for some reason, instead of like breaking their board, setting up the Jet Dragon loop, and then flipping up skill drain, and then just like snowballing them out of the game with Jet Dragon like I normally do, for some reason I committed to like OTKing them that turn. And I just tried to OTK. I wasn't able to OTK, and I discarded the skill drain off of Super Volley. And it's just like I just played into their resources, and I ended up losing that one. But yeah, so that was one where I lost. I played worse than them. I should have lost. Um, but even then, it's like if I would have played it correctly, I would have won that match. But it's just I should have been playing Dogwood instead of the Nib. The Nib did not do anything. Dogwood would have been better every single time. Um, so now that that's out of the way, I want to talk a bit more about the differences between the deck and Branded Despia. So I want to kind of compare certain points about each decks, and I'm not trying to necessarily say that like one is better than the other. I want to point out the differences between the two decks. So yeah. So one thing when it comes to comparing the two decks, and the strengths of weaknesses, I've found a lot of the time when people are comparing the two decks, when they say that like, oh, Branded Despia is better because it can do this thing, a lot of times they will attribute a strength to Branded Despia as being unique to Branded Despia, not realizing that it's something that both decks can do. They will attribute a weakness to Branded Blue Eyes as a weakness of Branded Blue Eyes, not realizing that it's a weakness that both decks have. There will be things that they will mention as like a conceptual weakness or like a conceptual problem with a deck, not realizing it's a deck building thing. Conceptually, both decks, because there's the idea that like Branded Blue Eyes is less consistent than Branded Despia, and that it bricks more, but that's not actually true. And that's more so a deck building thing as opposed to like conceptually a difference between the two decks. Because in context of like the number of bricks that you're playing in the decks, you have in Branded Despia you have Ad Libitum, you have Dramaturge, you have Tragedy, and you have Dark Magician, right? So depending on the number of these cards that you are playing, because some lists will play more than one Ad Libitum, some lists will play 3 Tragedy. But for the most part, if we're just talking like hyper consistent, you were like building the decks the same way, building, with the same goals in mind. This is what you're looking at. You're looking at about 4 bricks in Branded Despia, but comparatively, let's look at Branded Blue Eyes. You have the White Stone of Ancients, you have Blue Eyes Jet Dragon, you have Blue Eyes White Dragon, and you have Darling Tonia Cobra. You'll notice something. This is the exact same number of bricks that you have to play. In order for the decks to kind of do their thing, if we're building it to be like more functional and things like that, the reality is that yes, I play more bricks because I play a second Jet Dragon, I play a second Stone of Ancients, but you don't have to do that. I do that because it gives me a better grind game. Similarly, in Branded Despia, you can play 3 Tragedy to have a better grind game. You can play a second Ad Libitum to have a better grind game. You can decide to not play the Blue Eyes White Dragon at all and not have the Jet Dragon loop, but just summon the Jet Dragon as a monster on the board that says your cards can't be destroyed by card effects to protect against board wipes, But the thing is, you'll notice when you compare them by the same metric, they are very similar. They both play the same number of bricks. But what about starter cards? So comparing the consistency of both decks, right? Both decks have their normal summon. Branded Despia is playing Aluber. Branded Blue Eyes is playing Keeper. Both decks play Spriggan's Kit. So that's something that both decks can play. Both decks can play Gold Sark to banish Mercurier to get access to Spriggan's Kit. Both decks can play that. Both decks have access to Branded Fusion. But in regards to the number of starter cards that you're playing, right? Branded Despia has a card that Branded Blue Eyes can't play in the context of Foolish Burial, because Foolish Burial can send Tragedy to search a Luber and play like that. But while Branded Despia can play Foolish Burial, Branded Blue Eyes has Branded in High Spirits. So it kind of balances out. So it's not really that Branded Blue Eyes is less consistent than Branded Despia. They're both similarly consistent, and they both play a similar number of bricks. So from there, what are some of the more differences between the two decks? The main thing is that Branded Despia, right now at least, you have Branded in red, you have Branded Banishment, you have access to Dragoon. This is the thing that, Branded Despia. They have, the line where they go into Guardian Chimera. They can go into Guardian Chimera off of Branded in red. Right, they can go into Guardian Chimera off of Branded in red. They have Branded Banishment to be able to make plays. They can make Dragoon consistently. Right, these are things that are pretty much like the thing about Branded Despia right now, right? Whereas Branded Blue Eyes, it has like Tyrant Dragon. It has like the Chimera Felicia. It has the ability to like search Super Poly and whatnot. It has like the Jet Dragon loop. Like they each have like their thing. The thing is which one is better though? Well, it depends on the context. It depends on what you value as a player. It depends on what you're preparing for in a format, right? The reality is that at the end of the day, for me, the reason why I play Branded Blue Eyes over Branded Despia is because Branded Despia is a very popular deck, and most players are building stuff, releasing their main or side to beat Branded Despia. Whereas Branded Despia loses to those cards. At the end of the day, Branded Despia can't play through D-Barrier. They can't play through non-fusion area. They can't deal with the floodgates. They lose to Ash Blossom on Branded Fusion. Whereas Branded Blue Eyes does not lose to those situations. Going to the strength of the deck, what does the standard lines look like? So let's compare the two. So first off, I want to talk about the standard Branded Despia line, a Luber, and we'll have a random discard. So we're going to zoom out a little bit so we can see things a bit more clearly. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So this is the card in our hand, and we want to make sure we're taking note of the card advantage. So to start things off, let's zoom out a little more. There we go. So we're going to start with an Aluber. Normal summon Aluber effect, we're going to add the Branded Fusion. Then we're going to activate Branded Fusion. We're going to send Tragedy and Fallen of Albast to the grave. And we're going to Fusion summon Lubellion. Then we're going to Lubellion effect. We're going to discard our random card. And we're going to trigger Tragedy. And we're going to add Ad Libitum. Okay? So we're going to do that. And then we're going to resolve. We're going to fuse these, shuffle them back. And we're going to get access to our copy of Mirror Jade, right? So we have Ad Libitum, Mirror Jade, and Aluber at this point, right? So we started with 2 cards. We started with Aluber and the discard. Now we have 3 cards. So we've gone +1 in card advantage, right? Right. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to activate the effect of Mirror Jade. We're going to send the Albion to grave, and we're going to banish the Aluber. Okay? So we started with 2 cards. We end with 2 cards, right? During the end phase, we're going to trigger the Albion, and we're going to set our Branded in red. Okay? So during the end phase, the end result of this combo we've gone +1 in card advantage. Okay. Now, let's compare to branded Blue Eyes. Now, to compare to branded Blue Eyes, we're similarly Kiefer Dragon Magic +1 discard. So, we're going to normal summon our Keeper, discard our random card. We're going to add Instant Fusion. We're going to go Instant Fusion, and we're going to summon the Ambulo. Ambulo effect, we're going to add the Frog. Okay, then we're going to Ambulo effect, tribute itself, summon Cobra. Cobra effect, we add the Branded Fusion. Now we're going to go Branded Fusion, and we're going to send Fall of Albaz and the Stone of Ancients. And we're going to make Albion. Albion effect to fuse. We're going to fuse off the Albaz and the Ambulo in the grave to make our copy of Mirror Jade. Okay? Now from here, you're going to go ahead and scale the Frog, use the effect to fuse off your Albion and your Cobra, and you're going to make Dragostapelia. Now, during the end phase, you're going to go ahead and trigger the Stone of Ancients to special summon your Blue Eyes Jet Dragon, and the Albion will set your Retribution. And let's look at the card advantage. We started off with 2 cards, right? We ended with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, blah, blah, blah. My brain farted. 6 cards. And yeah, so you went +4 in card advantage, right? You went +4 in card advantage comparatively. Looking at branded Despia, you only went +1, right? Now, let's compare the strength of the boards. So, in branded Despia, you have the branded in red into Guardian Chimera into the Mirror Jade. So you have 2 interruptions. Whereas this deck, you have the Jet Dragon to protect your board against board wipes. You have Mirror Jade banish. You have Dragostapelia negate. You have the Retribution to negate a summon. And then the Retribution will also add back Branded Fusion for the following turn to establish the Jet Dragon loop, right? And then Mirror Jade will also do something. You know, with the Sen, you'll add stuff off of the Sen. But one thing about this version is that it's much, much, much more resilient to common things that people will play to beat the deck, right? If your opponent hits you with, say, a Lava Golem, right? Or they like super poly you. That's one of the big things is like, you know, you get super polyed, right? That's one of the things that branded Despia has always lost to. If they super poly you, right? Let's say they get rid of these, you still have this live. This is still a live interruption. Even though the Mirror Jade never got to send, guess what? Mirror Jade is also an Albaz fusion, so you can put back the Mirror Jade. And putting back the Mirror Jade does not stop the Mirror Jade from nuking their board after they've cleared it with Super Poly. Okay? So let's compare to card advantage wise. So the opponent starts to play, you Mirror Jade, you send and banish. So that's a +1. The Retribution negates and destroys. That's a 0 in card advantage because you lose the Retribution and they lose a card. So you've gone +2, or rather you gain another plus, right? But then on the following turn, you get to Retribution, banish, and add back Branded Fusion. You get to plus off of whatever you sent with Mirror Jade if you didn't end up using it. And the Stone of Ancients, if Jet Dragon ends up in the grave, you can add back the Jet Dragon. So it's like you just generated way more card advantage. But let's compare and look at the branded Despia setup. So now, comparing back to the branded Despia setup, right? So you have the Mirror Jade, but this Mirror Jade's already been used, but that's fine because we're going to summon it back to make it live again. So you have your branded in red. You go branded in red, you target the Tragedy, add it to hand, and then you fuse off your Tragedy in hand, your Ad Libitum in hand, and your Mirror Jade on board. They all get banished. And you're going to summon your Guardian Chimera. Guardian Chimera is going to trigger, Ad Libitum is going to trigger, and your Tragedy is going to trigger. Okay? The Ad Libitum is going to special back your Mirror Jade, so this is live again. The tragedy is going to search for another Aluber. So you're going to add this. And then your Guardian Chimera is going to pop an opponent's card and draw you 2 random cards. Okay? So you've gone +3 in this interaction, right? And then, you know, you get to go Mirror Jade Vanish and go +4. So overall, right, you have the next turn, you get to normal Aluber again, you get to add another Branded Fusion, blah, 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 right? So it's like they generate similar amounts of card advantage, they do similar things, but one thing you'll notice about this, right, is that prior to all of that happening, your only point of interaction is branded in red. So what if your opponent just goes Night Beam and they get rid of this? Then you just have nothing. You know, what if your opponent, you activate branded in red and then they super poly this off of the board? Well, now you can't make Guardian Chimera. So your ability to like continue to like do anything after that, like just drastically drops in comparison to Branded Blue Eyes. The reality is that when they both go off, the decks are similarly strong. But the thing about Branded Blue Eyes, and this is the reason why I personally have like always liked playing it over Branded Despia, is that it just simply doesn't lose to the same things. It's not to say that Branded Despia is a worse deck. It is that in the modern environment, people are going to be playing cards that beat Branded Despia, and those same cards that they will side against Branded Blue Eyes don't actually beat Branded Blue Eyes. If my opponent hits me with Contact C and I'm not playing Sprend, I can't play anymore in Branded Despia. If I'm playing Branded Blue Eyes, I just can switch to the Blue Eyes portion of the deck and the Dogmatica portion of the deck. If my opponent flips up D-Barrier and I'm playing Branded Despia, I can't play anymore. If I'm playing Branded Blue Eyes, I can keep playing. If I'm playing against, Floodgates, I'm playing Branded Despia, if I'm locked out of my extra deck, I can't play. But if I'm playing Branded Blue Eyes, I can keep playing. And the thing is, these are not hypotheticals. These are things that I've actually done at tournaments, and that's why I'm using them as examples. And at the end of the day, and this is the biggest reason why I truly believe that Branded Blue Eyes is a good deck, because at its core, the simple reality is that if Branded Blue Eyes was truly a bad deck, I simply wouldn't be able to consistently do well with it. Because that's the key thing, is that I consistently do well with it. It's not that I did well with it one time, one tournament, is that I consistently, format after format, tournament after tournament, do well with it. So that's going to be it for my thoughts on it. This was a longer video because I wanted to talk a bit more about things. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Again, there will be a pinned comment that details my matchups and everything like that. It'll also have the link to the Patreon. This has been Arim from Haltessiagaming. Thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful day. Come on, button.